Here's the story how I got revenge on my ex-girlfriend in the most satisfying way possible. This is a story about betrayal, patience, and letting karma do its thing. So, let's rewind to a few years ago when I was dating a girl. Let's call her Sarah. At first, everything was picture perfect. Sarah and I met through mutual friends at a party, and we clicked instantly. She was charming, outgoing, and had this great sense of humor that always kept me laughing. We had a whirlwind romance, and before long, we were spending almost every day together. It felt like one of those relationships you see in the movies, fast-paced, full of passion, and with plans for the future coming up naturally in conversation. We decided to move in together after about a year of dating. It felt like the natural next step. We found a nice apartment downtown, close to work and close to everything fun the city had to offer. The first few months of living together were great. We cooked together, went on weekend trips, and I genuinely thought this was it, the girl I'd spend my life with. But as the months went by, I started noticing things. Small things at first. Sarah became more and more secretive with her phone. Now, I'm not the jealous or paranoid type, so I brushed it off at first. I figured she just liked her privacy, and that was fine. But over time, the phone thing became more suspicious. She'd take it with her everywhere, even to the bathroom, and would tilt the screen away from me whenever a message came in. I told myself it was nothing, until she started canceling plans. We used to go out for dinner on Fridays, but suddenly, she'd say she was too tired or had work to catch up on. She'd come home late from work, claiming she had a big project that was eating up all her time. And she stopped making an effort, both emotionally and physically. I'd try to talk to her about it, but she always found a way to deflect the conversation. Now, I'm a pretty understanding guy. I've never been the type to jump to conclusions, so I gave her space and didn't push the issue. But after a while, my gut was telling me something wasn't right. Still, I wanted to trust her. After all, we'd been together for nearly 2 years, and I thought we had built a solid foundation. Then came the night that everything changed. It was a Friday evening, and I was at her apartment while she was in the shower. Her phone was sitting on the kitchen counter, and a notification popped up. I wasn't planning to snoop, but then I saw it. Her phone lit up with a message from some guy named Jake. The message wasn't just a casual text, either. It was something along the lines of, "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again." I felt my stomach drop. I wasn't the kind of person to go through someone's private messages, but at that moment, I knew I needed answers. So, I did what I had to. I opened the message thread, and there it was, dozens of flirty, intimate texts exchanged between Sarah and this guy Jake. From what I could tell, they'd been seeing each other behind my back for at least a couple of months. The messages ranged from playful banter to full-on plans for meeting up when I wasn't around. When Sarah came out of the shower, I confronted her. I didn't yell or lose my temper. I just asked her outright. At first, she tried to deny it, but when I mentioned Jake by name and showed her the messages, she couldn't hide it anymore. Her face went pale, and she finally admitted she had been cheating on me with him for months. Her excuse? "We've been drifting apart, and I didn't know how to tell you." I was heartbroken. She tried to apologize, saying she was confused and didn't mean for it to happen, but at that moment, I knew it was over. I grabbed my things and left, telling her we were done. But here's where the story takes a turn. Instead of wallowing in the betrayal, I decided I was going to handle this in a way that gave me closure, while also giving her a taste of karma. I wasn't going to stoop to her level by making a scene or dragging things out. No, I was going to take my time and strike back when she least expected it. See, there was something Sarah didn't realize. She hadn't just betrayed me personally. She'd also been using me professionally. During our time together, Sarah had been trying to climb the ladder in her career. She was working as a junior marketing manager, and she had been trying to get a promotion at this new firm she'd recently joined. The thing was, Sarah wasn't particularly tech-savvy. When she needed help with design software or web projects, she'd ask me. I'm in tech, so I helped her out. A lot. I even built entire marketing campaigns and website mock-ups for her because she said she was overwhelmed. Turns out, Sarah had been passing off my work as her own. She'd submitted several of the projects I'd helped her with, some that were 100% my work, to her new job as part of her portfolio. She used my skills to make herself look like an expert, and got hired for a position she wasn't qualified for. After we broke up, I realized this was my opportunity to even the score. A couple of weeks after I moved out, I still had access to all the original files for the projects I'd worked on. I had timestamps, metadata, and everything that proved the work was mine. So, I compiled it all into a folder and decided to do a little digging. I went on LinkedIn and found out who Sarah's boss was at her new company. Then, I crafted a very polite, anonymous email. In the email, I explained that some of the work in Sarah's portfolio might not be original and provided evidence that the projects had been done by someone else, namely, me. I attached the files with the timestamps and other details to prove it. I didn't go into personal details about our relationship. I just kept it professional, sticking to the facts. I sent the email, and then I waited. It didn't take long for the fallout to happen. About 2 weeks after I sent the email, I heard through mutual friends that Sarah had been called into a meeting with her boss. They confronted her with the evidence, and she had no way to explain it. She tried to say she collaborated on the projects, but the truth was clear. She had lied on her resume, misrepresented her skills, and submitted work that wasn't hers. Her boss didn't take kindly to that. Sarah was fired on the spot. No severance, no recommendations, nothing. She had only been at the company for a few months, so she didn't even qualify for unemployment benefits. It was a career-crushing blow, but that wasn't the end of her problems. Remember Jake, the guy she'd been cheating with? Well, he wasn't exactly looking for a serious relationship. Once he found out Sarah was single and no longer living with me, he ghosted her. It turns out Jake had been seeing other women on the side as well, and Sarah wasn't exactly his main priority. When she reached out to him, hoping for something more now that she was single, he completely cut her off. So, there Sarah was, single, unemployed, and facing the consequences of her own bad decisions. Meanwhile, I was doing better than ever. After moving out, I focused on my career, took on new projects, and reconnected with friends I hadn't seen as much during the relationship. I even met someone new a few months later, someone who actually respected and appreciated me. The best part of this whole experience? I didn't have to stoop to Sarah's level. I didn't have to yell, scream, or get into a messy fight. I let karma and the truth handle everything for me. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about letting people's own actions come back to bite them. And that, my friends, is how I got revenge on my cheating ex and came out on top. After Sarah's life started to spiral downward, I expected that I'd hear from her, maybe a long, regret-filled apology or an attempt to make amends. I figured she'd realize how much she had screwed up once everything fell apart. But, surprisingly, I didn't hear a word from her for months. In a way, that made things even more satisfying. I didn't need to rub it in her face or watch her beg for forgiveness. The silence was proof that she knew exactly what she had done, and she was too ashamed to reach out. Meanwhile, I was thriving. I had started a new project at work that put me in the spotlight, and I was getting more recognition than ever before. It felt like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders since Sarah was out of my life. There was no more emotional manipulation, no more walking on eggshells, and definitely no more wondering whether she was being truthful or not. One day, I ran into one of our mutual friends while grabbing coffee. This friend, let's call her Emily, had always been in our circle, but after the breakup, we hadn't talked much. I wasn't sure if she had taken sides, but I also didn't care either way. To my surprise, Emily seemed eager to catch up. She asked how I'd been, and after a bit of small talk, she mentioned something that made me raise an eyebrow. "So, have you heard about Sarah?" she asked, almost cautiously. I hadn't, and I told her as much. I wasn't keeping tabs on Sarah at all, but I couldn't deny that I was curious. Emily, seeing that I wasn't bitter, went on to fill me in. Apparently, Sarah had been struggling to find a new job. Word about her firing had spread in the local marketing community, and people knew she had been caught submitting fraudulent work. Her reputation was shot. It was a small industry, and even though she tried to downplay what had happened, potential employers always found out. On top of that, she had drained most of her savings trying to stay afloat while job hunting, and she ended up having to move back in with her parents. Now, this wasn't the kind of news that made me jump for joy. I'm not someone who thrives on other people's misery, but hearing that Sarah's lies had caught up with her and that she was facing the consequences? I'd be lying if I said it didn't give me a certain sense of closure. As for Jake, Emily told me that he had completely ghosted Sarah. After their brief fling fizzled out, he moved on with someone else. Sarah had been left high and dry, dealing with the aftermath of her own choices. It was almost poetic. After catching up with Emily, I went on with my life, feeling even more at peace with everything that had happened. I never wished Sarah harm, but knowing that she couldn't escape the consequences of her actions gave me the validation I needed. There's a certain kind of satisfaction that comes from knowing you handled a bad situation with dignity, while the other person has to face their own mess head-on. A few more months passed, and then one day, I did hear from Sarah. I was at work, busy with a new project, when I got a message on my phone. It was from an unknown number, but the tone was familiar. It was Sarah. The message was long and filled with a mixture of apologies and explanations. She admitted that she had been selfish, immature, and careless in our relationship. She said she regretted everything, especially how things had ended between us. She went on to say that she had lost everything: her job, her reputation, and even her chance with Jake, and that she realized how badly she had treated me. At the end of the message, she asked if we could meet up and talk. She said she missed having me in her life and that she'd do anything for a second chance, even if it was just to be friends. Reading the message, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Part of me had expected this moment to come, but another part of me didn't feel anything at all. I wasn't angry or hurt anymore. I wasn't even tempted to respond. In fact, seeing her desperate attempt to reconnect just reinforced how far I had come since our breakup. I thought about all the ways I could respond. I could have ignored her, or I could have sent a short, dismissive reply. But ultimately, I decided that the best response was no response at all. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of knowing she still had any hold over me, because, frankly, she didn't. I deleted the message and went back to work, smiling to myself. I realized at that moment that the real revenge wasn't about ruining her life or watching her fail. The real victory was that I had moved on, grown stronger, and built a better life for myself, while she was still stuck in the mess she had created. As time went on, Sarah became a distant memory. I continued to thrive at work, and my personal life was better than ever. I started dating someone new, a woman who was kind, supportive, and everything Sarah hadn't been. We built a healthy, loving relationship, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly happy. Looking back, I realized that sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even in a dramatic way. Sometimes it's about rising above the situation, letting karma do its work, and finding peace in the fact that you handled things with grace. Sarah had to live with the consequences of her actions, and I got to move forward with my life, stronger and wiser than before. And that's how I got the ultimate revenge on my ex-girlfriend. Not through anger or payback, but by letting go, moving on, and living my best life.